Welcome back to our BTS YouTube channel. In today's class, we are going to learn how to make this beautiful cupped corset with mesh yoke. It's a very simple tutorial. We used a ready-made bra cup to add the cup area. You can also use wadding for yours, and it's beginner friendly. If this is something you would like to learn, kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you. So for this corset, I'm going to use of this ready-made bra cup. You can also use wadding to pad your cup area if you want. So this cup is size 40, and that is what I'm going to use. So I have drafted my pattern. This is my chest line, my bust point, under bust, and my waistline. So from this center area here, I'm going to go ahead and take my bust span measurement. Mine is 4 inches. That's it divided by 2, and then I'll mark that on my waistline, my bust point, and my under bust line. Then I'm going to make that into a straight line. So after connecting like this to the bust points, I'll come to the shoulder area here, and then I will divide my shoulder into 2. I have 5 inches here, divided by 2 is 2.5. So now I'm going to connect from here to the 2.5. So this here is the line that my dart is going to follow. So to take my actual dart on the under bust, I'm going to take 1 inch on both sides, and then I'm going to connect that together. Sorry, the marker. So I'm going to connect the 1 inch line from the under bust to the waistline, just like this. And then here I'm going to connect with a curved ruler to my bust point. So I'm not connecting directly to the bust point. I'm coming half an inch downward before I connect. So this is the first line, and I'm going to place my ruler and then connect for the second line. Okay, so I hope you can see that. The next thing is to take the dart that we're going to use to tighten the upper bust. So for this is going to have a yoke, so I'm going to connect my neckline for my yoke before I do this. So for my yoke, I don't want it too deep, I don't want it to expose anything. So here, like I said, for the neck depth, I don't want it too deep. So here I'm just going to mark around 8 inches for the depth of my neckline, which is going to be around here. So for the height, so depending on how open you want the bust area to be, so from my bust point, this is my bust point here, I'm going to come up by around 4 inches or 3.5 inches. So I'm leaving at 3.75, which is around here. So now with my ruler, I'm going to connect, but because this is a corset, so the distance between the two cups, I want it to be around 1 inch. Sorry, my camera stopped recording, so I will explain everything that I have done so far. So what I did was to determine the depth of my neckline, which was 8 inches. Like I said, I don't want it to be deep up to my chest area, so I just came up by around half an inch. So I have 8 inches as my depth, and then I want the distance between each of my cup to be half an inch. Remember, this is still on fold, so the 1 inch. So the 1 inch, I'm going to divide it into 2, so that I will have a total of 1 inch by the time it's opened. So now what I did was to mark half an inch on that point where I want my depth to stop. So I marked half an inch there, and then I just made it into a small straight line there. So here, to measure the height of my cup, that's how covered you want the cup area to be. From my bust point line, I came up by 3.5 inches, which was here. So what I did was just to connect with my curved ruler from my depth to this height. Okay, you can see with this curved ruler, and then it's going to have a yoke. Like I said, I don't want my lower part to be part of the armhole. I want the armhole to, because I'm going to be using a mesh net for the yoke and the sleeve, so I want the yoke to be part of the armhole alone. That was why I connected. You can see that this lower part is not going to be part of my armhole. I just connected it to this armhole line straight. It's not part of this armhole curve as I have seen, so I just connected like this. So after doing that, I took my dart. I took a total of 2 inches dart for this upper part. So you can divide this, sorry, 1.5 inches, sorry, 1.5 inch dart. So you can divide the 1.5 equally by marking 0.75 on both sides. But for me, to the side that is towards the center, I marked 1/2 inch, and then to the other side I marked the remaining 1 inch, and then I connected that back to my bust point using my ruler as well. So that is what I did there. So after doing that, I got the 1/2 inch that I took here, I took the same 1/2 inch on my bust point and I made it into a straight line, after which I used my curved ruler to connect from my under bust to this line to form the first part of my cup. So now to form the second part of my cup, this is where my actual bust measurement stops. Okay, so that's where my actual bust measurement stops. So from there now you can remark your bust measurements, because now we have taken a little bit of that here. My bust is 40 divided by 4 is 10, so here I have like 4 and a bar. So I'm just going to shift it. You can see that I have shifted so that I'll not have this shortage part of my measurement. So now this is my new bust point, which is 10 inches. So now to mark the second part of my cup, I'm going to come in by 1 inch or 1.5 inches from my actual bust measurement, and then from there I'm going to connect from there to my under bust with this other part of my cup. So basically that was what I did before the camera stopped recording. So you can see now this is what my cup is looking like. You can see how simple it is. So what I'm going to do next now is to mark my waist measurement. The waist is 33 divided by 4 is 8.5. So here I have 3 inches. I'm just going to jump that, and then I'm going to continue my measurement. So now 8.5 inches is going to be around here. I'm just going to add my seam allowance. I'm using 1.5 inches for my seam allowance, and then I'll go ahead and connect them together. So the front part now is done. I can cut it out. This is my yoke, and this is the first part of my cup. This is the second part of my cup. So now after cutting this, now I'll move to the back. But before then, the corset has a basque waistline, okay, like a V shape at the center front. So to create the basque waistline, or this center part, I'm going to mark where you want the V shape to start from. So my half length is actually 18 inches, so I can mark like 3 to 4 inches depending on how deep you want the basque. So for me, I think I'm just going to mark around 3.5 inches, which is here. So the next thing after marking that is to connect from here to your side, but I'm going to do that after closing my dart so that it can be easy for me. So I'll just leave that first and then move to the back. So for the back, I have drafted my actual back panel. You can see this does not have any zipper allowance because I'm not going to use a zipper for this. I'll be using eyelets. Okay, I'm going to lace it with eyelets. That's why I don't have my zipper allowance. This is my dart. I took a dart of 1/2 inch on both sides. So now, like the front, the back is also going to have a yoke. So for the yoke, what I'm going to do is just to connect from where my neck, this is my neck point, this is my shoulder line. So where my neck point stops, I'm just going to take my ruler to form like a slight curve all the way to where my dart line stops. So you can see, you can choose any neckline of your choice. So all of this part for my neckline is going to be opened. So after that, now like I said, I'm going to be lacing the back. So for the spacing that's going to be between my lace, depending on how wide you're going to, because this is going to have a modesty panel to cover up this space that I'm going to create. So depending on how wide you want your lacing to be, for me, for the upper part, I want it to be around 4 inches wide. So the gap that's going to be between one back panel to the other is going to be around 4 inches for me. So for that 4 inches, remember this is a half scale bodice, I'm going to divide by 2 so that I'll have 2 inches on each side. So from my neck point, which is my chest area, I'm going to mark 2 inches on this side. And then for the lower part, I want it to be around maybe 3 inches thereabouts. It's not going to be as wide as this, so that it can give me like that V effect. So here I'm going to mark 1 inch, 1.5 inches, or 1.25. okay, we don't want it too wide. So what I'm going to do now is to take my ruler and connect like this. So connecting means that I'm going to be taking all of this off. This is no longer part of my measurement, and that is where my lacing is going to be crossing, and I'll replace that with my modesty panel. So that is what I did for the back, and I took my 10 inches for the bust and 8.5 inches for the lower part, and then I added allowance and connected it. So now that is what I did for my back, and this upper part here, from here upwards, becomes the yoke for the back as well. So now we're back to the front. To close this part, remember I said I extended this by 3.5 inches for my back. So here I'm just going to mark that line and then extend this dart to that line. So what I'm going to do now is to simply close this dart up. Okay, and after closing the dart, I'm going to take my ruler and then connect from this V point to where my body stops. Okay, so you can see that I stopped before my seam allowance. So that is where my basket belt is going to be, you can see. So now what I'm going to do next is to start to cut this out. So now I'll start by cutting off the darts. And also you remove your yoke. So like I said, you can see that the armhole is not part of the lower part. Okay, so I'll remove this yoke now, and then I'm going to cut the rest. So you keep your yoke, and then I'll continue with cutting. So now this is my center front. I'll go ahead now and cut the other darts so that I can have my side front as well. So from here I'll cut this, that's the dart, and then I'm going to cut the dart for the upper part as well. So this is my side front. I'll go ahead and cut my side as well. Remember that basque effect that we have. So that's the V that you have there, and then from there I'll cut the side of my body. So this is what we have for the front. So after cutting it out like this, by the time you close it up like this, you will see that your V basque is going to align at the hem because we closed the dart. So now after doing this, the next thing is to remove my cup. So simply you're just going to follow the shape that you created for your cup. That's what you're going to follow, and then I'm going to do the same thing for this as well. So you can see now that I have cut out the front. This is the yoke, these are the two cups. So I showed the cutting that much because some people complain that they need to see cutting video, especially for beginners. That was why I showed how to cut it. So this is my front. Now I'm going to keep it so that I can transfer to my fabric, and this is the back. And for the back as well, remember we already took this out as the spacing, so this is no longer part of my pattern. So this is how you're going to take the back out. And also for the yoke, remember this is not part of her measurement as well. So now I'm going to take this center part. This center part is going to be open as well. I'm going to take it out. So this is what the back looks like now. So the darts, I'm going to cut out the darts, and then I'll label it so that I don't mess it up, because this is going to look very similar now. So I'm just going to indicate that this is the up of the back. I'll indicate this to be the center and this to be the down. Okay, so you need to do that so that you don't get confused by the time you cut out your dart, because it's very small. So now I have cut this out, and then I'm cutting this out. So if you are using separate fabrics for your yoke, you may need to cut this yoke separately. But if you are not using separate fabric, if you are using the same fabric, you can just cut it together. You just need to extend allowance on this part so that you'll be able to join this together. I hope you understand that. So I think I'm just going to leave mine like this. I'm not going to separate the yoke. So for the front, I'm going to close my dart. For the front, I'm going to close the dart line, so I'll just bring the center front and side front together here, and then I'm going to use my tape to close the dart. For the back, I'm not going to close the dart because there is going to be a modesty panel at the back, so I need to insert my modesty panel in between the darts. That's why I'm not closing the back dart. So you can see now that the front dart is closed and they are just one single piece now. So what I'm going to do now is to take this to my table and bring in the fabric that I'm working with. So I'll cut it on my fabric now and bring it back to show us what we have. I have gone ahead to cut my patterns out on the fabric. You can see I added half an inch on the fabric on the cup area so that I can use it to sew it. I did the same thing for the two cups as well. So this is what it looks like. This is a satin fabric, and that is what I'm going to be using to line it. So I cut two. I'm going to use one to laminate the lace, and then the other one is going to be the lining. So I have also cut out the actual lace that I'm working with. I'm working with this green lace, and you can see. So I will use hemming gum to glue them together first. So after attaching them together like this, I'll go ahead and mark out my boning channels, and then I'm going to sew in my boning. I'm working with a regular boning, so I'll just go ahead and sew it on it directly. So after sewing my boning channels, I'm going to sew the cups together. So for the cup, I'm not using lace, okay, I'm using Duchess fabric. I'm using this green Duchess for my cup, and then I'm going to be lining it with satin as well. So I cut two of Duchess and two of satin for each side of the cup. Remember, we have two sides for our cup. So this is what I have. And for the back as well, I have cut the lining, the main fabric, and what I'm going to use to laminate the main fabric. So I have 4 satin and 2 lace here. So this is for the first side, and as you can see, I decided to detach my yoke, so the yoke is separate now. So I have cut out for this, and then I cut for the other side as well. You can see exact same thing. So what I'm going to do now is to go ahead and sew this. I'm going to be attaching stay to the cup area only, because what I'm using to line is a satin and it's strong enough for me. So I'll just use this stay to strengthen the Duchess that I'm going to be using for the cup. Then I'm going to remember I'm going to be working with a ready-made bra cup. So if you're working with a wording, you just need to cut it this same way, fix it together before you sew. So what I'm going to do now is to sew the back together, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew my bra cups together as well, and then I'm going to create the boning channels. So after doing all of this, I'm going to bring it back to us to see how to sew in our cups. I'm done laminating the fabric. Just like I explained, you just place hemming gum in between your fabric and the interlining, and then you use your outer. You can see the hemming gum. So after using iron, it's going to glue together and become one single piece, just like we have it. So after that, I went ahead to draw my boning channels. I'm going to be using about 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 for the front alone. So you can add as much boning as you want. For mine, like I said, this is what I'm using for the front, and for the back I'm just going to add one around here. Then I'm going to be adding extra two again when I'm joining the lacing bar. So that's why I'm just leaving it at 1 here. So now this is what I have. Now I'm going to go ahead and start sewing the boning. So it's a sewable boning, like I mentioned. So I'll just place it on it like this and then sew on the two sides that you can sew on. So I'll place it and sew. So when you're sewing, you leave half an inch before you start sewing the boning, and then you do the same thing on the lower part so that you can easily turn it out neatly. And for the cups as well, I added my soft wadding to the lining of the cup. Okay, I don't want it to just be there, so I added very soft wadding on it, and then I fused my iron to fuse them together. And for the main cup, which is the Duchess, I used Estee for the Duchess. So after sewing it, I'm just going to place my ready-made bra cup on the main bodies. So I'll go ahead now and do this and bring it back for us to continue. I've gone to sew in my bonies, as you can see. And after sewing in your boning, you go ahead and iron it flat, because remember, bonies are always curved like this because of the way they are folded. So I have ironed it, that is why it is looking this flat, and you can see the boning channels that I have there. So this is the front, and these are the two back panels. So I'm going to treat the back panel separately because it's going to have lacing bar and modest steel panel, so it's going to make this video very long. I'm not going to film that in this video, but I'm going to drop a link. I have a tutorial on that already. So this is what the front looks like. Now for the cups, I have gone ahead to join the cups as well, and then I have ironed open my seam allowance with the help of my bust ham. So these are the two lining pieces, and this is the main body. So for the main bodies, like I said, remember I padded this lining with a soft wadding. So for the main bodies, I just used a regular hasty, and I'm going to be inserting this bra cup inside it. So now it's very simple. You just place your bra cups and leave your seam allowance all around it, and then you're going to stretch it very well to make sure that you don't have anything packing. So I'm going to be using my hemming gum to attach it. So once I stretch, I'll place an hemming gum in between it, and then I'm going to stretch and place it on my bust ham, so you can see how flat it is now. So you make sure that you have everything really flat, and after that you go ahead and iron it. I have done for the first cup. You can see this is my bra cup inside it, and you can see that there is no seam line around it. So all you just need to do is to make sure you stretch it. So this place has to be as flat as possible. You can see how flat and bouncy it is looking. So you just stretch it very well, and then you open on this side, place your hemming gum, and with your hot iron you're going to glue them together. So after doing that, now I'm going to reduce the allowance that I have all around it, and then I'm going to sew this cup inside this channel that I have here. So you just sew it inside these two cups just like that. It's going to fit because we use the same allowance for both of them. So I'll do this now and bring it back to show us what we have. So I've gone ahead to sew it in. You can see now, so you can reduce this seam allowance or notch it so that it can relax you. So this is what it looks like on the other part, and you can notice that on this center part, remember when I was drafting, I said I don't want it too low. So this excess, that is what it's going to do for me. It's not going to make it as low as this bra cup is. So you can see how high my neckline is going to be. So I have done the same thing for the lining as well. This is the lining. I have sewn in the bra cups for the lining as well. So the next thing I'm going to do is to sew in my yoke. Remember, we have a yoke to this. We drafted the yoke earlier. So I cut two for this yoke so that I can use them to turn out each other first. Then after turning the neckline area, after turning it, as I'm not turning the armhole because I'm going to be attaching the sleeve to it. So after turning it, the next thing I'm going to do now is to place it like this, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew the yoke to the lower body. So after sewing in my yoke, I'm going to use the lining to cover everything up so that it can be neat. I have sewn in the yoke, you can see, and then I went ahead to use my lining to turn it in like this. So you just notch it, or you sew in hemming gum there, so that by the time you iron it, it's going to lie really flat for you. So this is what it looks like on the outside, and I use the yoke to turn each other so that I can have a neat finishing on the neckline. And I've also sewn in the back yoke as well, so that I can turn the shoulder neatly. So this is what it looks like now. So the next thing is for me to join the back to it. Like I said, the back has modesty panel and all of that, so I don't want to join into this video so that it's not going to be so long. So this is what the corset looks like after joining the skirt and the back to it. The tutorial on the skirt as well as the back is on the channel already. Like I said, it's very long already. I don't want it too long. And if you want to learn how I made this structured detail that you see on the shoulder, the draping and how to create the structure is also uploaded on the channel. If you want to check that out as well. I hope you enjoyed making this beautiful tutorial with me. If you enjoyed it, kindly like, comment and share. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.